Why do you think people disappear the moment you stop chasing them? It's because they were never really with you in the first place. That silence you hear when you stop calling, texting, giving, that silence. It tells you everything. It screams what they never had the courage to, saying they only stayed because you begged them to. And I'm going to tell you something hard, but something that will set you free. You should never beg for love. Never beg for attention. Never beg for respect. When you beg for something that should be given freely, you automatically place yourself below the person you're asking. And once you do that, you lose your power. People feel it. They feel when you are desperate to be seen. They know when you're afraid to be alone. And the moment they sense that fear, they use it. They may not do it maliciously, but trust me, they will do it. Mentally strong people, we don't beg. We don't plead for someone to care. Because we've learned the brutal truthing: if they can walk away, let them. You don't chase people who leave when you stop feeding their ego. You don't lower your worth to match their inconsistency. You don't sacrifice your dignity for a seat at a table that insults your presence. Being mentally strong means knowing what you bring to the table and refusing to shrink so others can feel tall. It means being so rooted in your value that when someone doesn't respect you, your immediate reaction is not to convince them, but to remove yourself. Because the strongest people in the room aren't loud. They aren't the ones putting on a show to get approval. They're the ones sitting in silence, at peace with themselves. Because they don't need the crowd's validation to feel worthy. Love should not be a battlefield where you constantly fight to prove your value. Attention should not come at the cost of your self-respect. Respect should never have to be begged for. It should be given, or it's not real. Let's talk truth. You stayed in places too long. You tried too hard. You over-explained yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You gave chances to people who collected them like trophies, never intending to change. And deep down you knew. You knew it wasn't love. You knew they didn't see you. But you stayed. Because you were afraid that walking away would mean you weren't enough. Let me flip that for you. Why do you think people vanish the second you stop giving? It's not a coincidence. It's not bad timing. It's the truth finally showing up without disguise. The moment you stop overextending, over-texting, over-caring, the moment you go silent, they disappear. And that disappearance, that's your clarity. That's your confirmation. Because real people, the ones who genuinely see you, feel you, respect you, they don't run when your effort stops. They step up, they reach out, they ask if you're okay. But the ones who vanish, they were only there for the version of you that bent, that stretched, that constantly proved. They never signed up for the real you. They signed up for the access, the convenience, the benefit. And when that ends, so do they. You need to start paying attention to how people act when you stop performing, when you stop pleasing, when you stop being the one who always initiates. Watch closely. Because that's when their truth shows. That's when you'll see who was never really with you, just next to you. Big difference. Mentally strong people don't fear this moment, they welcome it. Because that silence, that cussing, that absence, it filters out the noise, it clears the room. It protects your energy. You don't need to hold on to those who needed your chase to stay present. If they can't stand still when you stop moving, they were never walking with you. They were just following the light you carried. You are not meant to convince anyone to stay. You are meant to shine so bright that those who belong in your world come and stay without being asked. The second you start begging, for love, for attention, for respect, you're no longer standing in your power. You're kneeling. And the brutal truth is, people can feel that. They can feel when your need outweighs your boundaries. They sense when you'd rather be mistreated than be alone. And that moment, that's when the dynamic shifts. That's when they stop valuing you. Because you've already shown them you don't value yourself enough to walk away. Let me be clear, when you beg, you give up leverage. You hand over control. You teach people that your worth is negotiable, that you'll take crumbs just to stay connected. And once you set that precedent, it's hard to undo. They won't respect you more the harder you try. They won't suddenly see your value because you explained it 1,000 times. In fact, the more you pled, the less they hear you. You cannot force someone to love you the way you deserve. You cannot ask someone to treat you right and expect it to come from a genuine place. Respect that has to be requested is already broken. Attention that must be chased is already misaligned. And love that needs to be earned through sacrifice isn't love. It's control. Mental strength is knowing when to stop talking, when to stop reaching, when to stop lowering yourself to be seen. You're not here to audition for someone's loyalty. You're not here to earn what should be freely given. If they can't see your worth on their own, they're not meant to sit at your table. Mentally strong people don't walk into a room wondering who's going to notice them. They don't need the spotlight to feel important. And they definitely don't need a round of applause to believe in their own power. Because when you're solid on the inside, you stop chasing noise on the outside. You stop needing people to like you just to feel like you matter. Validation becomes irrelevant the moment you validate yourself. And that's where real strength lies. Not in the opinions of others, but in your ability to stand alone without flinching. The ones who constantly need reassurance, approval, constant attention, they're not strong, they're fragile. They crumble the minute people stop clapping. But you learn to clap for yourself. You learn to trust your decisions even when nobody understands them. You learn to walk away from people who don't get it. Because you don't need them to. The most powerful person in the room is the one who doesn't care if they're underestimated. Because that person, they're already 5 steps ahead while everyone else is still looking for attention. Strength is quiet. It doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it just is. And when you carry that kind of energy, people feel it without you saying a word. You don't have to perform for it. You become it. And once you become it, you'll never again rely on anyone else to remind you of who you are. Love, attention, respect, these are not rewards you earn by jumping through hoops. They're not something you chase, prove yourself worthy of, or beg to receive. They're either given freely, or they're not real. And when you finally understand that, when you stop believing you have to perform to be treated right, that's when you take your power back. You're not a project. You're not a fixer-upper. You're not someone who needs to be deserving enough to receive the bare minimum. But too many people spend their lives thinking, if I just do more, if I just give more, if I just become more, then maybe they'll love me, maybe they'll see me. That mindset keeps you trapped. It keeps you small. It keeps you dependent on people who are never going to give you what you're looking for. Not because you don't deserve it, but because they were never capable of offering it to begin with. When someone loves you, you don't have to ask for their presence. When someone respects you, you don't have to demand their loyalty. When someone sees you, you don't have to constantly remind them that you matter. If you have to repeatedly ask someone to treat you with basic decency, they're not for you. Mentally strong people know this. They don't attach their worth to how someone else treats them. They don't waste their energy trying to convince someone to care. They don't exhaust themselves trying to be enough for someone who has already decided to stay blind. Because the truth is, the right people don't need to be convinced. They recognize your value from the start, and the wrong ones, they'll never see it, no matter how brightly you shine. Love, attention, respect. These are not rewards you earn by jumping through hoops. They're not something you chase, prove yourself worthy of, or beg to receive. They're either given freely, or they're not real. And when you finally understand that, when you stop believing you have to perform to be treated right, that's when you take your power back. You're not a project. You're not a fixer-upper. You're not someone who needs to be deserving enough to receive the bare minimum. But too many people spend their lives thinking, if I just do more, if I just give more, if I just become more, then maybe they'll love me, maybe they'll see me. That mindset keeps you trapped. It keeps you small. It keeps you dependent on people who are never going to give you what you're looking for. Not because you don't deserve it, but because they were never capable of offering it to begin with. When someone loves you, you don't have to ask for their presence. When someone respects you, you don't have to demand their loyalty. When someone sees you, you don't have to constantly remind them that you matter. If you have to repeatedly ask someone to treat you with basic decency, they're not for you. Mentally strong people know this. They don't attach their worth to how someone else treats them. They don't waste their energy trying to convince someone to care. They don't exhaust themselves trying to be enough for someone who has already decided to stay blind. Because the truth is, the right people don't need to be convinced. They recognize your value from the start. And the wrong ones, they'll never see it, no matter how brightly you shine. You can't force someone to see your worth. You can't pour your heart out, explain yourself over and over, cry, beg, prove, and expect that somehow it'll make them change. Because people don't change when you beg them to. They change when they decide to, and most of the time, they won't. Not because you're not worthy, but because they were never willing to meet you where you were. You've wasted too many late nights, too many conversations, too many chances trying to get someone to understand your value. And what happened? Nothing. Because when someone is committed to misunderstanding you, no amount of honesty will reach them. You could lay your soul bare, and they'd still act like they don't get it. And the truth is, they do get it. They just don't care enough to change. And that's what hurts the most. But here's where mental strength comes in. You stop explaining. You stop performing. You stop offering your truth to people who are deaf to it. You realize that your energy is sacred. Your time is limited, and your heart is not a classroom for the emotionally unavailable. You don't need to teach someone how to treat you. That's not your job. If they don't come correct, if they don't show up with respect, with clarity, with consistency, you move. You stop thinking it's your responsibility to fix what they keep breaking. You stop apologizing for having standards. Mentally strong people don't explain their worth. They embody it. They let their silence do what their words never could. And that silence, that's where your power lies. Because once you stop chasing understanding from the wrong people, you create space for the right ones to show up without needing a single word. There comes a moment, maybe at 2 a.m., maybe in the middle of a crowded room, when you feel it. That deep, quiet H, that whisper inside that says, I don't belong here. You're surrounded by people, conversation, laughter, and yet you feel completely alone. And it hits you, this isn't connection. This is noise. You've been trading your peace for company, thinking that being surrounded would somehow make the emptiness disappear. But let's be honest. What's worse than being alone? Being surrounded and still feeling invisible. You've given so much of yourself just to feel included. You've forced smiles, laughed at things that weren't funny, stayed quiet when you wanted to scream, all so you wouldn't disrupt the illusion that you belong. But that's not strength. That's survival. And at some point, survival starts to feel like slow death. Because when you constantly betray who you are to stay connected to others, you disconnect from yourself. And that's a price no one should pay. There is nothing more mentally draining than pretending to be okay in a room where your spirit is suffocating. Where your voice doesn't matter. Where your truth is too loud, your boundaries too much, your standards too high. You ever notice how people will call you difficult the moment you stop tolerating disrespect? They'll call you cold when you stop overgiving. They'll call you selfish when you finally put yourself first. And that's how you know you're healing. That's how you know you're stepping into strength. Because the moment you stop making yourself small to make others comfortable, people will react. Let them. Let them get uncomfortable. Let them pull away. Let them say you've changed, because you have, and you should. Mentally strong people choose peace over people. They choose solitude over shallow connection. They'd rather sit alone in silence than perform for approval. That silence becomes their power. It becomes a place of restoration, not isolation. It's in that silence where the strongest version of you is born. The one that no longer needs to be seen to feel valid. The one that doesn't chase apologies or explanations. The one that trusts herself enough to know that not everyone deserves access to her. But that kind of strength, it's earned. It's forged in moments of heartbreak, betrayal, disappointment. Those moments when you realize someone you loved didn't love you back the same way. Those moments when you begged for someone to care, and they didn't. Those moments where you gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. And here's the brutal truth, you can be the most loving, loyal, giving person on earth, and someone will still treat you like you're replaceable. That's not a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their capacity. And when you truly understand that, Something inside you shifts. You stop asking why they couldn't love you. You stop wondering what you did wrong. And instead, you start asking why you stayed in the first place. Why you lowered your voice. Why you accepted bare minimum. Why you chose presence over peace. You begin to reclaim the parts of you that you buried to keep the connection alive. The parts that laughed too loud, that dreamed big, that loved too fiercely. You dig her up. You breathe life back into her. You remind her that she never needed permission to be who she is. And when you do that, when you choose yourself fully, unapologetically, you will lose people. Count on it. But you'll also find something greater in peace that doesn't come with conditions. Peace is not passive. It's not this soft, gentle feeling people think it is. Peace is power. It's the strength to say no when everyone expects a yes. It's walking away from a table you once begged to sit at and never looking back. It's trusting that solitude will give you more than the wrong crowd ever could. You see, when you finally stop fearing silence, you realize it's the most honest place you'll ever be. It reveals what noise kept you distracted from. It shows you who you really are. Not the version of you molded by trauma, not the version shaped by expectations, but the real you. The one who doesn't settle, the one who demands respect without asking twice, the one who doesn't flinch when she's left out, because she knows that her worth isn't up for debate. When you reach this level of mental strength, you don't just survive, you rebuild. You stop searching for validation, and you start moving like someone who already has it. You stop begging for love, and you become love. You stop asking to be chosen, and you choose yourself every single time. And let's be clear, this doesn't mean you shut people out. This doesn't mean you become hard or cold. It means you become intentional. You guard your energy like it's gold. Because it is. You don't entertain people who drain you. You don't explain your standards to people committed to crossing them. You don't carry people who were never meant to walk with you in the first place. You show up, fully, authentically, and if people can't handle that, let them go. Because you've finally learned your peace is too expensive to sacrifice for someone else's comfort. You will no longer be the woman who abandons herself just to be accepted. You will no longer beg to be seen, heard, loved, or respected. And once you taste that kind of freedom, once you realize that the silence you feared is actually your sanctuary, you won't ever settle again. You'll protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does. Because that peace, that silence, that self-respect, it's not just a choice. It's who you are now. You don't shrink for people who refuse to grow. You don't dim your light just because someone else can't handle the glare. If your strength intimidates them, that's their problem, not yours. If your voice is too loud, your truth too real, your boundaries too firm, they're not your people. Mentally strong people don't apologize for taking up space. They don't mold themselves to fit into places they've already outgrown. They rise, even when it makes others uncomfortable. You weren't born to play small. You weren't put here to make everyone else feel safe while you silently suffocate. But what happens? You start to notice how people flinch when you stand tall. You speak truth and they call you aggressive. You hold your ground and they label you difficult. You raise your standards, and suddenly you're too much. And for a while, maybe you believe them. You soften. You tone it down. You let them tell you who you should be just so they'll stay. But here's the catch. No matter how small you make yourself, it'll never be enough for someone who benefits from your silence. The moment you start accommodating other people's insecurities, you begin losing pieces of your power. And for what? To make them feel better about playing small. To be liked. To avoid conflict. That's not strength. That's self-abandonment dressed up as politeness. Mentally strong people know that if someone truly belongs in your life, they'll celebrate your growth, not be threatened by it. They'll rise with you, not try to pull you back down to the version of you they could control. When you're strong, you stop asking for permission to evolve. You stop explaining why your standards changed. You don't owe anyone a justification for becoming more of who you are. And don't mistake their silence for support. Just because they're around doesn't mean they're rooting for you. Some people will stay close just to monitor your rise. That's why your energy has to be sacred. That's why your boundaries have to be non-negotiable. Not because you're rude, but because you finally understand your worth. You're not here to make everyone comfortable. You're here to be real, to be powerful, and to be free. You don't fit in because you were never meant to. You were meant to stand out, to challenge the standard, to disrupt the pattern. So let them call you whatever they want. Let them misunderstand you. Let them walk away. Because every time you choose not to shrink, every time you decide to honor your power over someone else's comfort, you reclaim the parts of yourself you were taught to hide. This is what mental strength looks like, Heg. It's not loud or arrogant. It's knowing who you are and refusing to compromise that just to be accepted by people who don't even accept themselves. It's walking into every room, not needing to be the most liked, but determined to the most authentic. And if that scares people, so be it. You weren't made to be tolerated. You were made to be respected. Rejection doesn't destroy mentally strong people. It refines them. It doesn't crush them. It redirects them. Because when someone walks away, when they ghost you, ignore you, exclude you, you don't beg for answers. You don't fall apart. You don't start questioning your worth. You see it for what it is, a door closing so something stronger, something more aligned, can take its place. Most people take rejection personally. They internalize it. They let it shape their identity. What's wrong with me? Why wasn't I enough? What could I have done differently? That kind of thinking is a trap. It keeps you stuck in a loop of self-doubt, constantly believing that your value depends on someone else's decision to choose you. But here's the true thing. Some people will reject you not because you're lacking, but because your presence exposes their own. When you walk in with standards, self-respect, clarity, people who thrive off manipulation, ego, and control can't stand next to you. You become a mirror they're not ready to look into. So they run, they pull back, they disappear. And you need to understand that their exit isn't a loss. It's a reveal. Rejection is just life showing you who was never meant to go where you're headed. Mentally strong people don't chase what left. They don't revisit closed doors or try to convince anyone to stay. Because they know what begging does. It strips you of power. It turns your dignity into desperation. So instead of chasing, they shift. Instead of pleading, they pivot. They take the hit, process the pain, and then move with precision towards something greater. Because sometimes, what feels like rejection is actually protection. You weren't denied. You were redirected. That job you didn't get, that relationship that fell apart, that opportunity that slipped through your fingers. Maybe it wasn't rejection at all. Maybe it was the universe making room for something you didn't even know you needed. But you'll never receive what's next if you keep clinging to what's already gone. This is where your strength is tested. Not when everything's going right, but when something falls through. When someone you trusted lets you down. When what you wanted doesn't work out. Can you stay rooted in your worth when everything around you tells you you're not enough? Can you still show up strong, even when you're overlooked, underestimated, or flat out dismissed? That's what separates those who rise from those who crumble. Mentally strong people don't let rejection write their story. They don't let temporary pain dictate permanent beliefs. They use rejection as fuel, not to prove others wrong, but to remind themselves what they're truly capable of. They understand that every no brings them one step closer to a stronger yes. So when someone walks away, let them. When a door slams shut, don't knock twice. And when you feel the sting of rejection, don't numb it. Feel it, learn from it, and then keep going. Because rejection doesn't mean you weren't enough. It just means they weren't ready for the version of you that refuses to settle. You don't need applause to believe in your worth. You don't need the likes, the followers, the claps, the compliments, or the constant reassurance. You don't need someone to look at you and say, "You're doing amazing," just to keep going. Mentally strong people don't move because someone cheered them on. They move because they decided to believe in themselves long before anyone else noticed. This world teaches you to chase validation like it's oxygen. Post the picture, say the right thing, fit the mold, get the reaction, and when you don't, you feel empty. You question your value. You think something's wrong with you. That's the trap. Conditioning you to believe that your worth is something handed to you by others instead of something that's built inside of you. Let me tell you something. You were worthy before anyone saw you. You had value before anyone clapped. You were powerful before you ever got recognition. And that power, it doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from what people say about you. It comes from the choices you make when no one's watching. It comes from how you show up when it's just you, your reflection, and your standards. You want to know who you really are. Watch yourself in the dark when there's no reward, no recognition, no praise. That's where your real character lives. That's where mental strength is built. When you wake up, grind, push, grow, and fight. Not because someone's watching, but because you refuse to let yourself fall back into a version of you that you've already outgrown. There will be seasons where no one understands you. No one supports you. No one sees your effort. Keep going anyway, because mentally strong people aren't fueled by applause. They're driven by purpose. You could strip away the titles, the awards, and the attention, and they'd still show up. Not for approval, but for integrity. They don't perform for the crowd. They perform for the mirror. And that mirror, it doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It reflects. It asks you one question: are you proud of who you've become when no one else is clapping? If the answer is yes, you've already won. If the answer is no, no amount of praise will ever fill the gap. So stop chasing noise. Stop trying to be impressive. Be real. Be consistent. Be unshakable. Let your quiet commitment speak louder than 1,000 compliments. Because one day they'll notice. One day they'll look back and say, "She did it without needing us." And you'll smile. Not because they finally see it, but because you always did. You don't become mentally strong by chance. You become mentally strong by choice. By choosing yourself in rooms that try to make you forget who you are. By walking away when it would be easier to stay. By standing tall when silence would be more comfortable. You stop begging, you stop shrinking, you stop explaining, and you start owning every piece of who you are. You become the kind of woman who no longer waits to be chosen, because she already chose herself. You no longer fear solitude, because peace has become your power. And you no longer chase love, attention, or respect, because you finally understood the ones who truly see you will never need to be convinced. This is your edge, your quiet fire, your unwavering standard, and from this day forward you don't ask for it. You embody it.